The session right now is all about partnerships. How do we build bridges? In this room, as I said before, we have so many professionals who have so much intellect, experience. You know, we've heard from bankers, we've heard from various entrepreneurs. But how do we also build the partnerships in order to further those conversations in our businesses, in our career paths, etc.? So this is what we're going to be discussing. Welcome, gentlemen. Really, really good to have you both. Let me start by giving you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves. I'll start with Weswa, Enos, because you've given the keynote. They may know a bit about you, but perhaps just go into a bit more detail about yourself, and then Luther, I'll give you the opportunity as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon once again.
It's the lunch.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I did introduce myself earlier, so I'm going to save us a few minutes to actually dive into the discussion. But I think one thing that, of course, it's worth mentioning is that what we are trying to do as the UK Kenya Tech Hub is work with organizations like Jasiri, Kala, and others to make sure that we tap onto the opportunity that we do have and do a lot of what we call foundational knowledge gap in the ecosystem that is missing, and people have assumption that it exists. It's existing. The fact that you know doesn't mean that other people know. And I think that's a very important thing that we need to fix. So I'm really excited to be here. And I also really looking forward for the next Jasiri. I think I have so many things running in my head because I'm such a creative person. And I do always generate ideas randomly. So I'm just imagining that the next Jasiri will be such a big thing. And that's what I'm just thinking, how do we make even this bigger and more engaging and with very tangible outcome?
Thank you.
So, hello everyone, good morning or good afternoon. Hate to stand between you all and lunch. Definitely feeling the pressure, but very excited to speak to you all today. So a little bit about myself. I'm a waste management and recycling professional. How glamorous, right? It's something that you grow to love. It's not something that you dream of as a child. However, I believe there's so many exciting opportunities in Africa, particularly Kenya specifically. So many that I've been able to interact with, great networks, great people across all levels of society. I see Fiona across there, studying chemical engineering in Sheffield, right? So we definitely need to talk as well after this. But yeah, been in the industry 7 years across Europe, the Middle East, East, West, and Central Africa. And there's a lot that I can talk about regarding the wonderful world of waste. But yeah, buy me a cocktail this evening and I'll be sure to share. So.
Fantastic. So when we talk about partnerships and how our diaspora individuals can leverage these, I'm looking around at some of these banners, Nala, Zuri Code, and who else is here? Paid, and so many others. And personally, I also, lived in the UK for about 30 years. I've moved back to Kenya 3 years ago. I've found that there are so many companies, there are so many NGOs, so many organizational bodies that are looking to bridge and tap into the diaspora community. How would you advise, whether it's an individual or a business, how would you advise them to build those relationships and those partnerships so that they can also benefit from some of those opportunities that companies are looking for? I'll give that to you, Luther, first, and then Enos, you can jump in.
Sure. A common theme that has come up via this summit as well as the pre-event reception is not just risk, but lack of understanding in terms of doing business in Africa. And compared to what goes on in Europe and the US and other continents, is that relationships are key. So any business that wants to do anything in terms of Kenya or the wider continent really needs to invest their time and effort in terms of building the relationships, the friendships really, with people that they want to do business with. After that, the business comes naturally. However, when you're in Europe, it's the opposite. The business comes first, and the relationships are a bonus. So, yeah, that's how I would look at it.
Enos?
Thank you so much, James, for that. And I totally agree. Relationships are key. But just to add, I think because it actually takes what I call ecosystem thinking to actually get some of these things done. And I know from a development world, we like talking about equitable partnerships. And what that means is that both of our objectives are met, and it's a win-win. So this is my heart, being a development partner, because I work with the British High Commission, the UK government. But from a startup perspective, I've actually been a 2 times founder, for those of you who don't know. But I think just being at the right place at the right time really pays a lot. And whenever I go to such a function, I'm always curious to see where are the startups. So I'll ask, by a show of hands, how many of you are running a business or do run a startup? By a show of hands. Great. So you're in the right place and at the right time. You'll get the right networks, the right linkages to get you somewhere. Because that's all we need. The other thing is just being intentional. Intentionality is quite an important thing to look at. And I will combine that with community, sense of community. We talk of the Silicon Valley, we talk of the MIT, we talk of Stanford. And the Silicon Valley Stanford has been really great in the Silicon Valley. But they tried to make another valley using MIT. I don't know how many of you know the name. But it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And we know that MIT is such a reputable organization with a lot of amazing technology coming from there. Why did it not work? And by Valley, I mean this startup community that really works like the Silicon Valley. It didn't work because of the thesis that was built around it. And one of it was that when they invited corporates, we've talked about corporates, at least Innocent has mentioned corporates. They came and asked, what is in it for me? Okay? And that just messed that whole system. And then the government came and said, oh, this is the cake that we want to duplicate, we want to replicate this cake from the Silicon Valley. So we are here to regulate. You get what I mean? Everyone comes with their language. We are here to regulate. We are here to tax. Because I think this will... And it becomes such a hard experience. But now, that being said, there's a very interesting place in this world called Boulder, Colorado. That understood what happened in the Silicon Valley. And they were intentional about getting it right. And what did they do? They told corporates, if you're coming here to take, this is not your place. You give before you take. And for governments, we will guide your process into regulation and taxes. And this place is led by entrepreneurs, not by development partners. Okay? So they got it right. As we speak, Boulder has the highest density of startups in the world. You can just look that up and see what that means. So I'll stop there.
Okay, fantastic. And look, let me jump into some numbers a little bit, because I know we are all entrepreneurs here, we're smart people. Let's look at some numbers. According to Statista, that's one of these data analytics research firms I'm sure we all know, there are around 500,000 Kenyans living outside of Kenya. That's one stat. Another stat from our very able Foreign Affairs Office says that we have about 4 million Kenyans living outside of Kenya. That's a vast difference. But for me, when I look at this, I see vast opportunities, because it says, or at least it shows, that there's a market that is between, let's call it 1 million and 4 million. And these are people that have skills, these are people that have knowledge, and they have, different capabilities to be able to serve and develop the economy of Kenya, which is actually growing at around 5% every year. The question is here for both of you, and Luther, you particularly on, the waste management and ESG and all of those lovely buzzwords that we hear. How can Kenyans in the diaspora partner with local bodies, even with the Nairobi County government? There's a massive waste issue. Hold on to the question, how can we build those partnerships? And how can we as the diaspora who have skills in those areas actually support them? And then for you, as somebody who's running the tech hub with the UK, where exactly are you seeing those opportunities for partnership? Is it in real estate? Is it in tech? Is it in, I know you work in tech, but I'm sure you have a wider view on where those points are for partnership. So Luther, why don't you take it away with your area of expertise, and then we'll look at the wider picture.
Yeah, thank you, James. It's a very gripping and difficult question to answer, and I'm sure a lot of people have the same question for their respective industries in this room. I think to start off with, particularly with the government or the national or the county government of any country, it doesn't necessarily have to be with Kenya. But for any country that has a significant diaspora in Europe or the US or anywhere outside of the continent, they're not just going to open the doors to you. You really need to, earn your place in terms of being an expert in your space. But that's not to discourage all of you. I believe there's plenty of opportunities to really earn your place and prove your credibility. A lot of free resources, free institutions that are available to build your network, to get your name out there as the expert. So one free sort of tip that I can give actually, and something that I've taken advantage of, is actually giving a TEDx talk. So I gave one last year in Kisumu.
Let's have a round of applause for that. That's a TEDx talk for a young man who's been invited by TEDx to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, James, and thanks a lot, all of you, for the round of applause. So specifically how I approached that talk was to actually advise the county and national government in terms of 5 waste management policies that they should incorporate to really improve the counties and also the country's social economic situation. So those platforms for free, you don't need to pay to actually do a TEDx talk. However, those that are in attendance are people that are in your industry, people that are interested, and you may get the odd government representative there. So culminating all your expertise, all your work experience, whether it's from your degree in chemical engineering or whether it's from your experience in waste management, it's a great platform to actually do so. So just to finalize on that, it's something that you can just Google, what are the TEDx talks happening in my city or chosen city, and it comes up with, for example, you have Nairobi, you have Diani, you have Kisumu, there's plenty across the world. So that's something free for you to do.
And maybe perhaps an example of a successful collaboration, partnership, or consultancy even that you've had with a government agency, a government itself, or even corporate. Because I know you consult with a lot of corporates around Europe, around their waste management strategies. As a diaspora who's looking to grow in this area, maybe give us some successes around those.
Sure, it was like that question was prepared. So a success story. So April 2023, so last year, I consulted as a sub-consultant for the World Bank. It was government advisory for the Gambia, so they were looking at circular economy policies, and I specifically designed a waste strategy for Banjul and the wider area in terms of how they're going to manage the waste produced at all their hotels that are situated at the coast. So that's in the Gambia. However, further to that, let's say, for example, now in Kisumu, which I'm going to on Sunday, I'll be meeting with a very innovative startup called Mtaka, who are actually dealing with, the waste issue going on in Kisumu, providing jobs for people that don't necessarily have the opportunities to get many jobs, much like skilled professionals here. So something that I just want to highlight and be clear is just be present, and when you're in these countries, try and meet with as many people as possible. Share your knowledge, share your expertise. Don't feel the need to hold on to your knowledge and charge for your knowledge, etc. There's a time and a place for that, but there's value that can be attained outside of being paid. In fact, sometimes I'd rather not be paid for a certain opportunity because that's where the relationship ends. You really want to focus on building relationships in the continent, and that's something that I spoke about earlier. Thanks, James.
Wow, I heard World Bank, and all I saw was dollar signs. And but please, Enos, why don't you answer the same question, but in a broader aspect? We've talked a lot about tech. What other opportunities are there to partner, and which industries or sectors, apart from tech, can the local diaspora build partnerships in?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I will flip it a bit. And this is because when I was at the London Tech Week, we had an event by the GEP, that's Global Entrepreneurship Program, and they were talking about waves. And I think that's what basically we'll be referring to in terms of where is the next wave, or what is the next wave where we need to see opportunities invest. Those are always there. But they made a very interesting statement that we are no longer focusing on the waves, we are looking for long suffers, which I think really became quite challenging because like right now, if you ask me, Kenya has transitioned quite a bit. Of course, I always say Kenya started with fintech very well. And it's not like, yes, we were overtaken by Nigerians. And this was the thing. And that's where I'm talking about long suffers, because now it's the individuals who probably make the most out of these opportunities. So ideally, of course, with M-Pesa, Cellulant, there was a very good story for Africa about fintech. And Aboyeji, when he came, of course, setting up Andela here, and Andela was like, of course, was the in thing. Like, guys were really looking to see how Andela becomes a unicorn. And what happened is that Mark Zuckerberg came, ate at Mama Oliech. I think that's what many people remember. But he gave Andela about $20 million. And he moved, Aboyeji moved a bit of that to Flutterwave. And he confesses that it was what Kenya had done on fintech that ideally made him understand what scalable unit economics are there that could actually give you 10x in 3-4 years. And that's what he embarked in doing. Right now we are talking about agriculture. Agri-tech is a big one. That one is big. But climate tech definitely has taken the biggest bulk of quarter one, quarter two, quarter three funds that we attracted this year, higher than any other African country. So it went to Basigo, we've actually from our end, one of our department actually has funded a company called, what are they called? They do direct carbon capture, just forgotten the name, which is also in climate. So climate has, and this climate was built during the African Climate Summit. So the African Climate Summit unlocked about 6 billion USD in terms of pledges, that's where you see we have the data, those, they're called, Microsoft has pledged about 2 million USD on renewable energy for, it's data something, I'm forgetting, but they're gonna set it up at the geothermal, close to geothermal, so there's a lot of green opportunity. The Green Tech Hub was launched the other day. I don't know how many of you remember. So there was a Green Tech Hub happening in Konza. And then other than that, there was also, I know you know that the Global Center for Adaptation is housed in Kenya. So Global Center of Adaptation, this is the global, like the HQ for the globe in terms of adaptation for climate change. So that's also a big one. So I think just highlighting those ones, and we've seen that also from the UK government perspective, a lot of money has gone into climate and agri-tech. Yeah.
And I think that segues nicely into, what I want to, just maybe 2 points each, right? Michelle, when she was talking, she said something which was quite poignant, which was, start with the problem. Don't go and walk into a bank and say, hey, look, I can do this and this and this for you. Let's build a partnership or let's do some sort of agreement. But really understand the problem that they have. Some of them can't reach the diaspora clients as easily as perhaps Jasiri Network can do. So what problems do you see across tech, across maybe waste management and other areas that these individuals in this room and those watching online can solve on behalf of these organizations? Go for it, Luther.
Ultimately, we're all professionals, we're all, some of us are in university, we're across different fields. Why don't we all work across our respective sectors and try and improve the understanding of our sectors in Africa for those that are outside of Africa? From doing that, one can actually attract funding and attract interest from those outside the continent to invest in the problems that are in Africa. So communicating what are the problems that we face in waste management or data or tech or ESG or even finance, that's something I think all of us are equipped to work on. Yeah.
Enos? Yeah, thank you for that question, James. I think what we also try to demystify is the understanding of tech, because I think most of us limit tech to be digital. But tech is just, I'd say, an enabler. It helps you deliver on services better. It's a technology. It's a way of doing things. So with that, having said that, that means that, of course, we've said that Africa has a lot of challenges. It has a lot of problems, from healthcare to food. If you look at the ASAL region, like there's quite a lot of things to fix. And of course, the development partners are always looking at who's going to the ASAL community so that we give them money. It has an impact story and all that. But just coming to look at even an example for health tech, we have very interesting areas for finding solutions. But I think for me, when it comes to your ability to understand problems and also understand how big the problems are, and map out, does this problem make commercial sense? I think it's the most critical bit, because we have seen a lot of funding going to early stage. And that what Innocent was talking about, it's declining. Because moving from seed to Series A is also a challenge. And we find that basically, if you get smart guys, they can package a product and try and sell it. But the challenge with that is that if you're just selling a product and not a solution, you won't get to product market fit. Because now the market has to regulate you and say, we are not coming back. And again, hype. We have very serious hype problem in our country. And you'll find that people will say, have you tested this? Have you done this? And then it just fizzles out. You don't want to build your business on hype. Build it on something that customers will come back and say yes. And that you can easily get to product market fit and transition to the next level. So those are just quick things that probably would help a few people who are trying to build their companies or their startups. Last but not least, I think one thing I've forgotten is to really demystify the issue about SME and startups. I made it a point that I'm an advocate of trying to unpack that for people, and reason being that you'll find banks don't fund startups, and VCs don't fund SMEs. And that means they are significantly different, both in business model and structure. So the business model for a startup is actually a high growth company. That means that you're basically going to achieve 10x, but you can't achieve 10x with an SME. So why is that? One is a local business model. Anyone can copy and you share market. You will share market. And we are very good in Kenya for copying. You set a shop here, 10 of them will be there the next morning. For a startup, it's something called innovation-driven enterprise, where basically you invest a lot in really trying to create that X factor, that secret, trade secret, that will give you a bit of monopoly to actually get to times X before everyone realizes that you're already there. So one is a boiled egg, as an analogy. Another one is actually a fertilized egg. So if you take a boiled egg into an incubator, you will wait for years. You will not see anything. But you can't just eat a fertilized egg. You get what I mean? It has to get slowly into the incubation process for it to hatch.
Fantastic. Luther, I think you had a supplementary comment to make.
Yes, thanks, James. And I have a very short point in terms of all of the industries that we work in. I promised myself today I'm not going to talk about politics, so this is just as far as I would go. But in our respective industries, whether it's in Kenya or any other African countries, there are policies and regulations that are released that affect all industries. So, for example, in Kenya this year, specifically affecting the waste management and recycling sector, there was the extended producer responsibility regulation that was gazetted recently. And there are a number of companies and individuals that are concerned as to what fees they may have to pay or what taxes, what levies, etc. In terms of focusing on businesses, yes, we've talked about funding, etc., but simply really demystifying what the policies are saying and providing that information to businesses is solving a problem within itself in the continent. So that's something that I would implore everyone here to also look at as a potential solution, something that is quite sustainable, because policies govern how businesses and individuals are to operate and act within a certain country's jurisdiction. So you don't necessarily need funding to really launch something in that space. Yeah.
Fantastic.
My name is Matthias. I have a question. What's the valuable insights on how business can integrate carbon credits in their sustainable strategies? And also another question is, the primary problem facing Nairobi is waste disposal, especially in the Dandora dump site. How can the government provide solution to improve this? And
Well, Enos, you can cover that. Then the
Yes.
waste management portion can be.
So that's a complex climate conversation, but ideally it's called. There's two companies. One, it's called CAVEX. They were trying to use M-Pesa to see how they can facilitate paying for the carbon credits. But ideally, of course, the biggest challenge in Africa has been, how do you value, let's say, a forest, and that you planted a forest and say, this is worth this much. I think that data has always been played around by the people who hold the biggest voice and biggest technology. But I think that's also a conversation that people are exploring. So happy to probably discuss that later.
Luther, what can governments do to tackle the waste management problem that we have in Nairobi?
Sure. So the government can give me a call on 07. I'm being serious, by the way. There are multiple layers to it. Waste management, though it doesn't sound glamorous, there is a huge amount of money flowing through the various aspects of the supply chain. So it's very difficult to really dislodge current players who may be dumping waste in Dandora dump site, as we mentioned in the question just there. But I encourage the county government, not just in Nairobi, but across all counties in Kenya, to just take a step back and look at it from a strategic level. We need to create a waste management strategy for the whole county. So that entails calculating how much waste is produced across all types of land uses, whether it's residential land uses, commercial, or even industrial land uses. So once we indicatively know how much waste is generated across the different categories, we can then decide what investments we need to make in the different facilities. I am vehemently against dump sites and landfills, because a lot of the money, which will benefit a lot of the people working in this industry, is substantially lost. And we can't trade that waste to countries like China or Europe or the US, which generates a lot of value across the whole world. So, for lack of getting into very technical details, they need to really look at engaging professionals, not just in Kenya, but abroad, like myself or James, if he'd be interested as well, to really decide how is the waste in this city, in this county, going to be managed, and really enforce it through organizations like NEMA and other organizations. But it's a longer conversation, a very difficult answer to give, but hopefully I've given you enough nuggets to guide your thinking there.
Thank you. Thank you, Luther, and thank you to Enos, our esteemed panel. Give them a round of applause, please. And in conclusion, I'll speak from a very brief experience. There's so many companies out here who are looking for people just like you, right? I was approached by Tattoo City the other day. They want to try and reach out to the diaspora audience. They have no clue where to start, which cities to go to in the UK. we're helping them to try and do a roadshow across the UK. When Nala was at its very inception, stages, myself, Nancy, and a bunch of others helped them to grow their client base to a point now where they've raised $63 million or something like that. I think, Nancy, we need our cut for that, right? But so the long and short of this is, you guys are highly skilled, you're highly knowledgeable, and you're highly connected as well. Use those connections, use those skills that you have to try and bridge gaps that local companies here have and that want to actually reach diaspora clients wherever they are. So I want to thank you for your time, and we will connect through the network session. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you.